Stanford University.
Welcome to Stanford Medicine's Contemplation by Design Summit. I'm Dr. Tia Ridge, the founder and director of Contemplation by Design. It's my great honor to introduce our speaker, Heiner Fruehauf, who will be speaking to us about a brief history of Qi. Heiner Fruehauf is the founding professor of the College of Classical Chinese Medicine at the National University of Natural Medicine in Portland, Oregon. Dr. Fruehauf lectures in North America, Europe, and China, and has authored a wide variety of articles and textbooks in the field of Chinese medicine. His interest in preserving some of the traditional features of East Asian medicine led him to develop a database dedicated to the archiving of classical knowledge, where a selection of his publications can be accessed. The website is titled classicalchinesemedicine.org. His strong belief in the clinical efficacy of Chinese herbal medicine led him to found the Healing Order, a wellness center in the Columbia River Gorge, specializing in the holistic treatment of difficult and recalcitrant diseases. Welcome, Dr. Fruehauf.
Thank you so much for the introduction and for the honor of being invited to your event here. The presentation title, I will share my screen shortly, is A Brief History of Qi from Ancient Cosmology to Modern Applications, including personal cultivation and use in medicine, but really also in everyday life for us. I work in the field of Chinese medicine, a professor at the Natural Medicine University here in Portland, Oregon, but really came to the field as a patient myself. I was trained to be a sinologist, specialist in Chinese literature, and then was diagnosed with cancer as a young man, just the year when I completed my PhD, and then decided to go back to China for another few years and learn Qigong and learn Chinese medicine for self-healing purposes, and founded this College of Classical Chinese Medicine here in Portland since I've returned. So all of my, the profession of Chinese medicine is founded upon the concept of Qi. All of our diagnosis is diagnosing the Qi rather than the condition of the material body, which is preconditioned by the field, the Qi field, so to speak. And when we're treating the Qi of the patient. And then, of course, we are teaching patients very often, in addition to influencing their own energy flow with modalities like acupuncture and Chinese herbs, which are also not exclusively differentiated with biochemistry, but were traditionally, since thousands of years, classified according to what Qi they have, what meridians they influence, what organs they, whether the Qi is warm, whether the Qi is rising, whether it's descending, whether it's hot, etc. So it is basically the entire medicine, Chinese medicine, is based on Qi diagnosis as well as treatment. And then also the self-cultivation in Qigong, which translates as Qi work. So I will start with the more theoretical. Since I'm a sinologist, I'll start with some of the more theoretical background here. What is Qi? How has it been defined by the Chinese themselves thousands of years ago? How is it being attempted to be redefined nowadays before different political and social background, and how has it been introduced in the West, and what does that mean for the field of Chinese medicine, how this medicine is practiced, and what, as non-Chinese medicine people, can we take away from this concept of Qi, and how can it be useful for our everyday lives. I'm going to share my screen here. Yeah, brief history of qi. The topic of qi is inexhaustible. It is basically an exploration of how the material world that we know and that we investigate with the lens of modern science, how it is tethered to a energetic plane that is self-organizing and that is hierarchically on a higher plane. That is basically the story that I'm about to tell you, that from a perspective of Chinese medicine, Chinese cosmology and physiology, and really similar ancient cosmological systems like Ayurvedic medicine, the material world is not an entity in its own right, but that there is sort of a information that precedes it, that is in the realm of the invisible, that informs, that gives it shape, gives it form, and also gives it intelligence in terms of cell division, reproduction in nature. Many articles, books, dissertations have been written about this topic, some of which I will cite here. So these were some that I can think about. There are cosmological, philosophical aspects of qi and inquiries. There's material aspects of it, spiritual, physiological, psychological, emotional. Here are some versions of the most ancient way of writing the Chinese have, as in the mainland, so-called simplified characters nowadays, that were, as of 70 years ago, were the long style characters that have been existed for about 2,000 years, which were preceded by different styles of script before that were even more hieroglyphic and pictographic. And so these is in the so-called oracle bones, which hail from about 1500 BC, from the so-called Shang dynasty. We see this kind of different versions of the character qi, which is basically waves, informative waves that come down from the top down from heaven, very similar, in some cases, as of on the right, portrayed as solar rays. So qi is basically a field reality, an energetic field that is streaming down from the heavens from this perspective. In more modern versions of writing that, meaning about not 3,500 but 2,000 years ago, you then have these the same character written like this, already not as pictorial. And on the right side, you can still see these number 3 there, heaven, earth, and humanity, meaning this kind of energy field that is penetrating through all spheres of life, but comes from the top down. The abbreviated character for qi nowadays is still written like this. But at the core of it is this character on the left, which means to beg for, to yearn for. So qi is not only an energy field that is penetrating and preceding all physical manifestations in the heavens, on earth, and in the realm of society, and within the microcosm of the human body, but is also that nothing in this world that is alive can survive and exist without being nourished and constantly sustained by this thing called qi. Another way of writing, we said that qi originates from the heaven, originally streaming down. It's interesting that one early form of the character heaven, which is written nowadays still and has been for the last 2,000 years, as we see on the left side, pronounced tian, is this more pictorial form on the right, where we see this emanation, this vibration energy field, formative energy field coming down from heaven onto the material plane of the earth. Here is a definition of qi by Tan Se Tung, a political figure in the late 1800s, was participated and was eventually executed in a kind of a rebellion, but against the Manchu Qing dynasty. But he was also a philosopher who was trying to explore at the time when Western culture was coming into China, what is the nature of Chinese culture? And he found it in this concept of qi. So he said, everywhere in the realm of physical phenomena, in empty space, as well as all intelligent creatures, there is something that looms extremely large and subtle at the same time. It is in everything, permeates everything, and connects everything. The eyes cannot see it, the ears cannot hear it, and neither mouth or nose can perceive its taste or smell. It does not have a name, but we consider it to be the greatest. So it does have a name, but he's hearkening back to the Tao Te Ching, where the first sentence of the Tao Te Ching is the Tao that can be named is not the real name, meaning it's you put a definition on it, it's already limiting what it is. So he is kind of hearkening back to that. So describing qi here. In a certain way, the character qi is very much related to the character for 3, right? Because it is this different permeation and through 3 different realms that the Chinese call Tian Di Ren, heaven, earth, and humanity, that are all co-resonating with each other. And all of Chinese medicine in a certain way is resonant theory, is what we would call or have called in the Western hemisphere alchemy, this kind of as above, so below resonance between an alchemical fusion between the macrocosm above and the microcosm below. It's also interesting that the character for king we see on the right side is also related to that. It's just he or she, who is the connector of the 3 realms, is the king or queen. And so that is in a certain way what we as physicians also do, is this idea to connect heaven, earth, and humanity together, rather than just stay rooted and present only in the realm of the physical, as modern science tends to do. We also see this character for qi here in the word qian, for what's nowadays translated as heaven, but is really the name of hexagram 1 in the I Ching, the Book of Change, which is the first written document we have in the Chinese language from about 3,000 years ago. So here we see a qian, and some of you may be familiar with this hexagram and the trigrams of the I Ching. So we have 64 hexagrams and 8 trigrams, and they all basically describe energy patterns in the universe, how they play out in the macrocosm of heaven and in nature, as well as in the human being. And we see on the right side there again how the trigram combination for qian at the very top there is again these 3 lines that are 3 unbroken yang lines. So it's pure energy. Yin broken line is representing the material world. So qian or qi is pure steam-like energy, whereas everything else is sort of a mixed form of energy moving in matter, perhaps. Later, we come to the 4th century, and ever since that time on, we have the character qi written with the word rise underneath it to kind of root it more in the material plane and show its connection to matter, how no matter is animated without the qi inside of it, without that bioelectric energy coursing through it. But very clearly it is associated, the concept of qi in the last 2,500 years or so, with the concept of food, of nourishment. It's something that sustains, not just births life, but sustains life, like a kind of energetic level, immaterial type of food, which is, of course, the food we grow in in agriculture is nutritive only from the Chinese perspective, because it is translating the invisible immaterial qi into a physical matter, and it's not because of the vitamins and starches in there that makes qi food nutritive to us, but it is the electromagnetic vibrations that hasn't made it into any modern nutrition pyramid or so yet, but that is the vitality that's in the food that is important, rather than the dead matter that we can name and characterize in laboratory studies. The ancient term for qi cultivation that we call qi gong nowadays, which is really a word that is only about 100 years old, was therefore yang sheng, nourishing life. Like by doing movement meditation, quiet meditation, we are basically trying to directly absorb qi from the earth, qi from the atmosphere, qi from the sky, and through breathing, through visualization, through movement, and using this food-like metaphor here, yang sheng, nourishing life. In the quote-unquote Bible of Chinese medicine, or we should say the original classic of the Han Dynasty from about 2,000 years ago, when China became more centralized as a culture, there was an imperial court now and a library and an imperial academy. So all of these ancillary wisdom knowledge from the countryside, from singular people meditating in the mountains, those people were called into the capital and everything was archived. And this is what makes Chinese science great, because we have so many oral traditions, including the ones we have in the United States, like Native American medicine and working with energy there. It did not get written down to the same extent, and therefore has not been preserved to the same extent. There are tens of thousands of books, some of which you see behind me here in my personal library here, that were written during the last 2,000 years about qi science and how it should be used as a foundation of Chinese medicine and Taoist cultivation. So the Huangdi Neijing, the Yellow Emperor's Classic of Medicine, says, 在天为气，在地成形，形气相感而化成万物, which translates as what is qi in the heaven will become physical form on earth. And only when this heavenly qi and the physical form do not separate and keep interacting with each other can there be autopoiesis. Can there be self-replicating cells on Earth? Can there be life on Earth? Can there be the 10,000 living things, human beings, animals, plants, etc.? So instead of just prescribing physical matter and its form and its color and its taste, the Chinese are exploring what is the particular type of energy that is enervating a particular plant, a particular animal, and then also a particular organ, the human body. In the I Ching that we've already mentioned, this 3,000-year-old book, the Book of Change, that is sort of the oldest science manifesto of the Chinese, also used, of course, for what we know as an oracle, but it was really a book of symbols that uses symbols like the trigrams and the hexagrams of the I Ching to describe different energetic states, tens of thousands of energetic states, but brought into a roster of 64 possibilities. That book then later spawned lots of commentaries, including, according to legend, by Confucius himself around 500 BC or so. And when we read these so-called commentaries to the I Ching, the following cosmology emerges, that the Chinese basically take this realm of energy informing, birthing itself into matter, is divided into 5 different categories, starting with the so-called Tao on the very left, where also the term Taoism comes from. Then comes the Qi that we're talking about here. Then comes Xiang, it really means elephant, but in an extrapolated sense means symbol, because elephant is the biggest thing that nature produced in the eyes of the ancient Chinese. And energy on the left, the Tao, the thoughts of the universe, the consciousness that lives in the universe called Tao, and the momentum, the energetic of momentum of the universe that wants to express itself in physical form called Qi, the divide, and then having Xing and Qi on the right side, different Qi here, meaning physical shape and 3-dimensional form. In between, we have this Xiang, elephant or symbol sign, which means what divides the world of the matter, which we investigate through the lens of modern science, and the world of electromagnetics and even deeper mysteries that the Chinese call the Tao. They can be translated, or the dividing line is the realm of Xiang, meaning using symbols. And all ancient societies have used symbols, like the 5 elements, like yin yang, like the 12 naders of ancient Egypt, the 12 Olympic gods in Greece, etc. Those are all symbols to describe particular energies present in nature that make visible in anthropomorphic form or in plant form or animal form particular types of energies that are present at different times of the year, for instance. So here we, in a nutshell, have this cosmology of the ancient Chinese, and I would venture to say really all ancient cultures that I have encountered, from Egypt to India to Mayan culture and Sumer and Babylon. They had a similar kind of way of looking at things. This Qi, of course, is in the beginning is all unified. So this is a particular feature of Taoism as it's expressed in Lao Tzu's Tao Te Ching, or in the Zhuangzi, for instance, the other important book of Taoism, both of them philosophical, cosmological works talking about the Tao and about how the Tao is manifesting itself in the form of Qi that is everywhere. And that Qi, while we have the 10,000 different shapes, physical shapes, they are enervated by the same Qi. So this very important to the ancient Chinese to always emphasize the unity of Qi. I have different examples here, but this is originally from a lecture that, if I would go into details, would take 3 hours or longer. So I'm picking up the important parts here, underscore them. So the Qi as one, and that one we see in Greek literature in the Middle Ages and also in ancient Egypt here, expressed as this, what we call in Greek or Latin term, the Ouroboros, the dragon that bites itself in the tail, is basically the same Qi, the same energy bringing, life sustaining, heavenly energy that is present in nature throughout the course of the 12 months of the year. And it is all the same Qi. So so this here's the cycle of the day, the cycle of the year, portrayed as one Qi, but which is then, of course, further, since Qi, one of my teachers pointed out, you can't just have general philosophical statements for science. Science needs to have details, and Chinese cosmology, as well as Chinese medicine, has incredible amounts of details. It's not just everything is Qi and everything is therefore connected, but what kind of Qi is present and what kind of times of the year. So here we have this hexagram science using the so-called Shara Xiaoxi Gua, the 12 tidal hexagram. So out of 64 symbols in the I Ching, the ancient Han Dynasty scholars 2,000 years ago selected 12 to describe the waxing and waning of energy throughout the course of the year. So at the very bottom, we have the winter solstice. At the very top is the months of the summer solstice. And then the vernal equinox on the left and the autumnal equinox on the right. And then we have the other months of the year in between. So we've got the 12 months of the year with different expressions of qi. Here, using differentiation of the one qi, using dividing into two, namely yin yang, yang being pure energy, yin being more material, and then describing the presence of this energy at different times of the year, with the winter solstice, everything being super dense, with one yang rising at the bottom, they upside down here, according to traditional portrayal of this circular movement of qi here in this chart. And then one yang turns into two yang in January, turns into three yang in February on the left there, etc. And so at the same time, the Chinese used vibrational science to otherwise also describe the vibrations that are present in nature through music. So they had this concept of the 12 pitch standards. The world expert on the 12 pitch standards is Professor Lothar von Falkenhausen, who is your very own Stanford University professor, if he hasn't retired since, but he's written a number of books on bells of ancient China and the pitch standards that they represent and the vibrations that they produce. They can be translated into modern musical language. Here you see, starting on the very left is the winter solstice hexagram with one yang. What, the energy in nature is described like a bass note of C, and then we have C minor, I believe that is, and D, and etc. So we've got the 12 notes of the octave here with the in-between notes that are used to describe the symphony, the qi in nature that is playing a vibrational symphony that we often cannot hear, but that is described here with these musical notes and with these hexagrams at the same time. Furthermore, China was an agricultural society, and the 12 months of the year were further divided into these so-called 24 agricultural nodes, and they have names like the beginning, they are 2-week periods. So we have 2 for each month, like the ones for the first months of the year, which is approximately February in the Western calendar, is called beginning of spring. And then the next 2 weeks, sort of end of February, beginning of March, is called Yu Shui, rainwater. So they also are symbolic in a certain way. And if we stare at these characters long enough, as I have done for the last 25 years or so, there is tremendous amounts of information that tells us more. There are further symbols describing the energetics of this one energy dragon in nature that is further differentiated into 12 different time periods, and further differentiated into 24 time periods, and further differentiated into 72 time periods, namely every 5 days there is a different qi moving in nature, or that ever same qi is taking a different kind of quality. So the first months of the year is divided into these 2 agricultural nodes that I just mentioned, but also further divided in these 6 wuhou that are called, the material manifestations that are called Dongfeng Jie Dong. The east wind melts the ice. The hibernating insects begin to stir, fish emerge above the ice, etc. So here we're using very material, descriptions. Of course, there's much more happening in nature than just that, but they are material examples from the material world that are particularly suitable to express the energy, not just of that month of the year, but of this 5-day period. And so we have lots of maps from 2000 years ago where you've got the one Qi at the center that is further divided into the yin yang, yang rising on the left in spring and summer, or at sunrise and high noon. And then yin is the same Qi contracting at sunset and midnight, or in the circle of the year, fall, harvest time, and winter solstice. And then you see these different kinds of descriptions, from yin yang to the 12 months of the year to the 64 hexagrams, even aligned outside of that cycle. So the Chinese have a 3,770-year-old system, I believe, a word that is recorded in the Huangdi Neijing, the Yellow Emperor's Classic of Medicine, that's called Wu Yun Liu Qi, where there is not only the description of the qi as it moves through the 12 double hours of the day and how it repeats itself in the 12 months of the year, right? Expand on the left, it gets lighter and warmer and more energetic, and then it gets denser and more contracted on the right, the yin phase. But that 12 cycle is further differentiated into a 5 times 12 60-year cycle that's called the Wu Yun Liu Qi, the 5 movements of the planets in the heavens and the 6 weather patterns on Earth. And that is an amazingly accurate and way under-researched field, where it basically describes, if the energy in this year is like that, and because of this, it'll rain more, or it's hotter, and because of that, these plants will die more, and other plants will grow more, and because of that, humans living in the northern hemisphere at least, will suffer more this year from those kind of diseases, but then the plants that grow more abundantly that year because it rains more will be the medicine to treat those diseases. So it's a very holistic kind of system where everything in nature fits together. Again, I can only briefly mention that, but it's an amazing, detailed kind of systems that people had already thousands of years ago in the Eastern Hemisphere there. As I said before, everything we see, all scientific endeavors in the ancient times, they are alchemical in nature, which means are exploring the fusion of so-called heaven and so-called earth, which means the fusion of this intelligent energy that is electromagnetically streaming down and is then enervating everything below. So to calculate the weather, to calculate a human lifespan, and when maybe somebody will become more sick than at other times. But also, of course, the science of Chinese medicine is, what kind of diseases are more prevalent in the fall, in the spring, in the summer, and why is that, and how does that relate to certain energy patterns that are happening outside of us, etc. So in the Huangdi Neijing, this important Chinese medical book, there is this alchemy is expressed in the following terms. Here's how the microcosm of the human being is related to the heavenly Tao, or the macrocosm of nature, is we have 5 so-called Zhang organs inside of us. and they correspond with the 5 pentatonic notes in nature, with the 5 colors in nature, which are also a type of vibrational patterns, the 5 flavors, the 5 directions, etc. And then there are also the so-called 6 Fu organs, the hollow organs like the bladder and the gallbladder, etc. The 5 Zang organs were more lung and liver, etc. And they resonate with these the different kind of tonalities. Perhaps, some of them are the half tones we encountered before. But the most important thing is, it says there is these vibrations of nature produce the meridian system of the human body, which is, and I'm adding that, the human body is then like an instrument that is co-resonating. We've got 12 strings inside of us, and those are the so-called 12 meridians of the human body, and they resonate with the chi of nature and all of the colors, that same chi that is expressed in different sounds, different colors, and different directions. And the chi that is present in the 12 months of the year, and the stellar constellations that are present during that time. Also, material manifestations on Earth, like the 12 symbolic or major waterways here in ancient China, and the 12 time periods of the day. And so, in other words, it goes on to say the 12 meridian system in the human body is the way how we as human beings, that those are our receptor sites where we co-resonate with the macrocosm of nature, with the intelligence of nature that is called Tian Dao, right? The heavenly Dao, and the Qi, the electromagnetic momentum that springs from that. And then it goes on to say, all efforts to treat a human being and diagnose disease need to start here. And while everybody, the beginner, thinks this may be the easiest thing in the world, anybody who masters this science knows that this is the most complex and most difficult science there is. So this is what I've done for the last 25 years in my second academic career, not as a Chinese literature major, but as a scholar of ancient Chinese medical text, is this relating of these 12 meridians and the so-called 12 organ systems that are attached to these meridians that the Chinese have in their repertoire for medicine. The body's functions are divided into these 12 systems, and while the brain and the nervous system, they don't seem to be part of this here, they actually are. Every single function of the body, not just physical functions, but emotional movements, spiritual movements, and realities are included in here. And they are divided among these so-called 12 meridians that, as Chinese medicine practitioners, we diagnose and treat that, and how they are related with 12 rivers in China, 12 months of the year, 12 times of the day, and then how they further described with the 12 so-called 12 earthly branches, 12 tidal hexagrams, and then different stellar constellations that go with that. So that is then all, since these 12 organ systems or meridian systems of Chinese medicine are not to be confused with the same sounding heart, small intestine, bladder, kidney of Western medicine. They are really functional networks that by far exceed the anatomical reality of these Western organs. It then is, of course, important for us if we want to understand Chinese medicine, not just a little bit, but deeper. What are the Chinese organ networks then, if not these material organs that we can operate out if there's a problem? But they are 12 vessels which contain really electromagnetic pathways in the body that are in co-resonance with different energies that are present in nature during the 12 months of the year. So that is what I teach at my university, the College of Classical Chinese Medicine at NUNM in Portland, is these cosmological, but really diagnostically most relevant background. What is the small intestine? What is the stomach, etc., of Chinese medicine? I use these symbols to describe the functions of that. For instance, if we learn the stomach, then we go into this body of water that's called the Haishui, which is a body of water now in the Uyghur region in close to Afghanistan and Pakistan in the northwest of China. That's nowadays called Lop Nur. Its location and function related to the stomach. Why? One needs to go, that explanation I've spent the last 25 years with. That hexagram 43 that is describing the energetics of the third month of the year, and at the same time, the time from 7 to 9 in the morning, that, by the way, is called shi shi, time to eat. Of course, that goes with the stomach, etc. Certain stellar constellations in the sky that are called Wei, Mao, and Bi, which are approximately the Pleiades, the rain constellations. And interestingly, the Wei constellation means stomach. So there is a constellation in the sky that's called the heavenly stomach that is in resonance somehow through this symbolic system with the earthly stomach in the body, And then there's, of course, all kinds of star lore and knowledge about that constellation, which will inform us then also about how the Chinese looked upon the function of the stomach meridian network in the human body and its ramifications in not just the physical, but the emotional and the spiritual realm. Therefore, many a scholar of ancient times, including Sun Tzu Miao, the patron saint of Chinese medicine, who was a historical figure who lived in the 6th century, approximately, say, Yi Zhe Yi. A typical Chinese word game. If you want to understand Yi as in medicine, on the left, upper left there, you need to understand Yi as in the I Ching, the book of change, or the book of symbols. So you need to understand the science of symbols first if you want to understand the science of diagnosis and treatment in Chinese medicine, which is, of course, the how to diagnose and treat the 12 meridians where the qi circulates in. So we're treating not so much the physical body, but we're treating the informing part, the enervating part of the physical body, which is hierarchically stipulated to be on a higher plane. And so if you change the qi, the matter shape will follow, So that's why in Chinese medicine, why does a tumor grow back when you operate it out? It's because the energetic tumor energy, pathological tumor energy is still there. And so that's, if you don't remove it, it'll keep metastasizing. So while it's, of course, helpful to have the main tumor gone in Chinese medicine, you then try to, through acupuncture and through Qigong exercises and through herbal medicine, try to influence the qi so that this phlegm, this tumor energy that is most often classified as a type of phlegm or stagnating blood lump is removed, and therefore minimizing the chance for that coming back. So the simplest, just quickly, there are so many layers of symbols. We've just spent some time on the 12. The simplest is, of course, the division of the one qi into yin yang. It really, yang means to expand and go up, and yin means to contract. And that's what nature does. This yin yang sign here that most of us are familiar with is really a cosmograph, is a cosmological map that describes qi movement in nature, with yang rising on the left from the summer, starting at the winter solstice and going through the spring equinox, culminating at the summer solstice. when it's most warm, most light, all the physical world is expanded and then contracting, going into the yin phase here in autumn and winter. So that's the original meaning of yin yang, which is basically yang qi and yin qi differentiation. The two get further divided into four. Those are the four seasons, right? Spring energy is a birthing energy of physical world is being born because there is a kind of warming, expansive qi present in nature at that time. In summer, there is a, whether it's sunlight or other cosmological radiation factors, there's a growth qi there. So everything is growing quickly to the highest place. And then there, as that nature qi is ingathered, is being retracted, the material world follows that command and is withering and dying as well. And then finally in winter, as the qi in nature goes into storage, it is, the material world is also, all the insects and the plants are in a kind of a dead zone and hidden under ice and snow, at least in the northern hemisphere that this is descriptive of. Really, that is what the 5 element system in Chinese medicine is taking the 4 seasons and adding a transformative element, the earth element, to that, right? Spring was wood, summer was fire, fall was metal, winter was water, and then there is a in-between element of the earth. So, but it's really all yin-yang, 5 elements, 8 trigrams, 64 hexagrams, 12 months of the year, and the 12 earthly branches, whatever they might be. There are different symbols to describe the ever same thing of how this qi, what it looks like, how many parts yin, how many parts yang, how much expansive energy, how much contractive energy is present in any given situation, in any given cell, in any given month, in any given disease and organ, right? So yin yang is always associated. The concept of 2 contains 3 also. So qi emerges from the center and is then diversifying itself into yin yang. And we have, of course, in modern physics, this Big Bang theory where, nature is coming from one center that we call the galactic center. And in the Chinese cosmology, we have that too. In the beginning, there was just one that differentiates into the 2 that come out of the center, the spinning into matter, so to speak, with certain things rising, gases rising and denser particles falling down. But then once this world is produced now, everything wants to find back its way back into the womb. And the entire enterprise of Taoism is really cultivational movement to have this yin-yang, which is polarities in nature, wanting to fuse together to come back to the state of unity that matter has lost. So yin-yang very often portrayed in the form of these different, whether it's in Egypt or here in China, it's Fuxi and Nuba, is this kind of union. It was really sexual union of yin and yang, meaning our world is sexual in nature, which means it's polar in nature, which means these opposite poles now are trying to fuse together and become one again. And that is really in the medicine what a Chinese culture is therefore obsessed with, this concept of the center, because all energy comes from there and all energy wants to go back there. And just like in physics, Big Bang, expand universe, and then it's falling back and becoming a big black hole again. So we have Chinese medicine is called Zhongyi, the medicine of the center. China is called Zhongguo, the country of the center. And in the most ancient text here, like for instance, these bamboo strips at Tsinghua University in Beijing, there is, in this, document from 2,300 years ago or so, there is this legendary advice of King Wen to his son, King Wu, on his deathbed, were just a few characters, as you can see, and the character 求中守中 keep coming up. Always seek the center, always hold on to the center. Same thing in the Tao Te Ching chapter 5, right? Don't talk so much, just hold on to the center. That's really what meditation, even in English, is, returning to center, right? It's a Latin word. So the cosmic center is the galactic center that is in the vicinity of the Big Dipper, and then the 12 signs of the zodiac that are differentiated into 28 stellar constellations that the sun and the moon move through is description that you very often find in ancient Chinese portrayals, and you always have the emperor is riding in the cart of the Big Dipper that is at the center of the sky, near that galactic center. So what they call the Shangdi, that the missionaries translated as God, is really, as Professor David Pankanier describes in his very good book, Astrology and Cosmology in Early China, confirming Earth to Heaven, basically description of the alchemical process, a unity of microcosm, macrocosm that I'm describing here, has the theory, and I think very correctly, that the character D for God or emperor, heavenly emperor, is originally a measuring device that was used to use the Big Dipper and other stars to find the empty galactic center where most radio waves or most energy in the universe was emanating from. And we find that so in 3,000 4,000 years ago, when China became a state with imperial ambition and defined itself as Zhongguo, as the country of the center, we have the orientation of all houses due north, focused on the galactic center and focused on where the most energy comes from. And so in the Tao Te Ching, we find cryptic references to that. 30 公一国, 当其无有, 车之用. 30 spokes come together to form a hub. It is the emptiness of the central space that makes it useful. What are the 30 spokes? Is the 28 constellations make up the Chinese zodiac with the sun and the moon, but it's the power that emanates from the empty center, that black hole of the galactic center, that where there was at least 4,000 years ago no pole star, that enervates everything, and then on Earth you also have, in the Chinese cosmos, you've got this earthly equivalent. It's Mount Song, close to the Shaolin Monastery, by the way, in today's Henan province. So you have this as above, so below. You've got this center in the sky, you've got a center on Earth, different mountains on Earth reflecting that. And then in the body, you have, of course, also centers. Of course, you find this central swirling movement coming from a center that then differentiates into yin and yang, uprising and contracting movements in storm patterns, in snail patterns. So we have this informative energy, that swirling energy, imitated by these fractal patterns in nature, right? So the galactic center, from a perspective of modern astrology and modern physics, is Sagittarius, near Sagittarius A, and is a black hole that we can now photograph. This is a different black hole, but we can see there is lots of energy coming out of these holes. So in the human body, it is this connection between this midline in the body where our energy comes from. And when we're doing movement meditation, or when we're doing sitting meditation, breathing meditation, or if we do acupuncture in a nutshell, I'm seeing we already, well, I have plenty more slides. We already approaching the end of our time here. So I want to make sure I get the most important points in here. It is the self-healing power, the intelligence of nature resides in the sky. In the front is the sun, which is the most, we've seen the original character for qi as kind of cosmic vibrations in the form of sunlight, but also this kind of northern vibration that comes from the galactic center, and in the body, it's the heart at the top that the Chinese call imperial fire, that is very solar-like, and the ministerial fire below that is associated with the kidney, the triple warmer, and the gallbladder. And together they connected through this chakra system, to use the Indian term here. It's the midline of the human body. And when we do meditation, we basically focus on this midline. We can see this here. For instance, here is my colleague, Dr. Liu Lihong, who's written the book Classical Chinese Medicine that I helped translate, and my Qigong teacher, Professor Wang Qingyu on the left, who's also Liu Lihong's teacher. Is this basically you focus on your internal, you try and in meditation try to find the center, but also in acupuncture, you are trying to galvanize the self-healing energy that resides inside of the body, that is similar to the sun, that is similar to the galactic center and the macrocosm, to intelligently come to the fore and heal whatever problem the body has. So different from Western medicine that would focus on kill the virus, for instance, or vaccinate against the virus, or guard against this external force. In Chinese medicine, there's very much a focus on how do I strengthen the self-healing capacity of the body, so that the body, no matter what comes at it, can defend itself, and that the body's inherent intelligence is not going haywire. Like COVID as an example, as we know, people not really dying from the virus, but since a lot of people test positive, have no symptoms, but they die from the cytokine storms or bradykine storms, which is basically autoimmune reactions, allergic reaction to the spike protein that comes with that virus, and then causing heart failure and myocarditis and strokes and lung filling up with fluids and things like that. So it in Chinese medicine, there is of course antiviral herbs, etc. It is really trying to rein in, bring the body's chaotic qi that is freaked out in a situation like that, that's triggered by an external invader, whether that is invader is a emotional trigger or is a kind of climate trigger like cold or heat, or whether it's a virus or bacterial trigger. You're trying to bring the immune system back to center and make sure there's also enough energy in that tank there, in that central tank. While we have plenty more material, I want to give you a chance to ask questions here. We have 16 more minutes, so back to you, Tia, here.
Dr. Fruehauf, it is a joy to enter into the body of knowledge that you are sharing, and sharing it with such inspiration and clarity. I will move to our questions, since we have several that have come in. And the first one is, how would you have diagnosed and treated your cancer with Chinese medicine? So I start there because you ended there with your last point. So maybe we can bridge them.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you for that question. I mean, I did treat my cancer with Chinese medicine. I was not in the field of medicine, but I grew up in a Western in a Western medicine family where my father and my grandfather were Western style physicians in Germany, but they were very much of the natural. They had a specialization. Just like you can have in cardiology, you had one in natural medicine was a possibility, not anymore. But at the time in the 60s and 70s in Germany, when I grew up, you could have that. And so they would treat with homeopathy, they would treat with essential oils and neural therapy, which is basically injection into nerve endings, which is similar to acupuncture. And so I was very much influenced by that. So I had the operation and had the tumor removed. I hadn't metastasized at the time, but then refused the radiation treatment that was suggested to me with great pressure, saying, if you don't do this, you'll be dead in 2 years. And just did acupuncture and Chinese herbs instead, and then felt so helped by that that I went to China to study that and study also the art of Qigong. And then they just said, if we can only guarantee you 2 years with this radiation treatment. And then after 2 years, they had to admit that I was now in a better position to, because I didn't have the toxicity of the radiation, possibly chemotherapy inside of me, and therefore better survival chances for down the road. And it's been 35 years now, so I'm not thinking about that anymore. But coming back to the real meaning of this question is, if I would have already known Chinese medicine at the time, it would have been a stagnation in the, I had a testicular cancer at that time, which is a typical young man cancer, possibly coming partially from me writing my PhD and sitting on my butt for 16 hours a day and creating massive stagnation from not moving around. And so the qi wasn't flowing, and therefore the blood wasn't flowing from a Chinese medicine perspective. And so this whole reproductive region in Chinese medicine belongs to the liver meridian, possibly also the stomach meridian. And so that is also because even after the operation of where the tumor was removed, on one side, there was no reduction in pain in that general region. It wasn't until I got acupuncture on those meridians that instantly that pain started disappearing. And so that was intriguing for me. And if it was now, I would try that first before getting the operation, to just see whether, once the energy flows, whether this tumor can't be melted down. But anyway, this combination, so to speak, of East-West therapy together did do the trick and did help me. I'm, however, very glad that I did refuse the radiation, because I had one child at the time. I have 3 now, and they're guaranteed radiation of the remaining testicle would have very much greatly minimized my chances to have more children there, and then of course increased my chance to get cancer down the road. So
Thank you. You spoke about the triggers could be viral, climate, or psycho-emotional, and then talked about how the central source of energy supported the body in healing itself. Most people in Western medicine only think of viral type triggers. Could you say more about the climate and the psychosocial acknowledgement in Chinese medicine?
yeah, I mean, it's like when I was in, my parents sent me to my regret at the time, but later was grateful that to traditional German high school, where your first foreign language was Latin and later classical Greek, and then only then English. So the I read a lot of these kind of Greek mythology stories or so when I was young, and as Western people, we are very much like King Midas, who the mythological king who wished that everything he touched turns to gold. So he touched his food, turned to gold. He touched his beloved daughter, she turned to gold. So there's this addiction to matter, and everything we touch turns to matter. And so when we diagnose as well as we treat, the only sphere we are acknowledging is not the Tao and the Qi or even the Xiang, but only the Xing and the Qi on the right, which is anything that is physically present. So anything we cannot see in the blood work, anything we cannot see on an ultrasound, the patient must be imagining that. And so anything that is not a material trigger, like a bacteria or a virus, or a chemical, for instance, like asbestos or so causing cancer, therefore we can't fathom or has no place in this medical science that is very much rooted really because we have now modern sciences that are very advanced, like at the University of Chicago, my alma mater, they have, cosmic ray science and how that influences the human body, and bioelectromagnetism. There's lots of biophoton, light inside of the cell. None of that has made it into Western medicine, which is very much rooted in the 1800s with biochemistry and this cumbersome model of different molecules bumping against each other, rather than thinking the body is full of information, which is probably the best word to translate Qi. Where at the speed of light, the whole body as a system is not only communicating, every cell is communicating with another, but we are connected with all this information on the outside. Every color we see, every voice we hear, every smell we perceive, every weather change. And very often, we joke and say, oh, Mercury is in retrograde again. To ancient people, that was very real, that different constellations of sun, moon, and stars would beam down on us different kinds of, not just different sunlight in the summer and the winter, but different planetary constellations produce different energetic patterns that they described in their ancestral, this Wu Yin Liu Qi science. And that is all woo-woo stuff. That's either New Age woo-woo or it's realm of religion or psychology, but doesn't really have a place in Western medicine, when really, so that's a tremendous promise of Qi science, is that we get to take into account diagnostically and also in the treatment world anything that has an influence on us, like different people exude different energy, different places exude different energy, different climate patterns, different colors. There's treatments in China where I witnessed this one case where he'd been given up by both Western as well Chinese doctors because he had liver cirrhosis with a huge belly full of water. And he went to this feng shui master who said, you need to be exposed to black color only. And he had him paint a room black, and that didn't have any windows, and only once a day somebody would open up a little thing that was also in a bag. So he was surrounded by complete blackness for 3 months. And then after 3 months, he emerged from there without water in his belly. So it was this color also is a translation of energy of the water element that was, according to this feng shui person's diagnosis, deficient and responsible there. And he just used not herbs, not acupuncture, no material things. He just used the emanation of a particular color that carries a particular qi, a particular type of information for our body, to not just sometimes a little bit of black, but 100% black without anything else. And that then had a cumulative effect to heal the body. So interesting stuff like that is, just as an example.
Thank you for weaving together so many elements of this wisdom. You had shared the various symbols that showed the patterns and the 12 patterns, et cetera, on and on. Is there anything that portrays from the past, the era of human history that we're in, that shows what the imbalance of this era is?
Oh, that is, of course, yeah. I'm not a specialist on Wu Yin Qi. That's really like a very typical, like the very specialized science. However, because the last few years have been so unprecedented, I'm 61 years old now, and so I've just completed my 6-year cycle, and before I thought I had seen it all, and all of a sudden we have like extreme polarization in society. We have pandemic, a bizarre disease I haven't seen in 35 years of medical practice, um, strange political shifts all over the world, strange strong men emerging everywhere, and this strange attachment to giving up democratic things and just having one person say what we. So I did look into that. So we are in the year 2022. We basically energetically similar to the year 1962, and energetically similar to the year, or let's say this entire period from 2020 to 22 is similar to 1960 to 62, and similar to 1900 to 1902. And those were very geopolitically difficult times. Those were times of revolution, where the Great Leap Forward had just happened in China. Shortly thereafter, the Russians left China. There was natural catastrophes like they hadn't been seen in a long time. There was starvation. There were pandemics. There was a big cholera pandemic at that time. And in Africa, I think there were lots of rebellions. 19 countries became independent at that time. So it was a great time. The 60s, as we know, also in this country, were a big time where former norms were overthrown dramatically in a very short period of time. And as a university teacher, not that much was different in the 30 years before. And the last few years, not just because online or so, but even before, there are lots of shifts or so where I'm like, I need to re-educate myself and what language I use in the classroom, etc. So there is definitely lots of different changes, but particularly from a medical perspective, very certainly energy patterns in nature, particularly in the Shaoyang. That's a division of these different Qi into 6. They all Chinese not only have a 2 and a 5 and a 12 and a 64 system. There's also a 6 system that's involved in the Wu Yin Liu Qi. And in there, the Shaoyang energy was dramatically going with the gallbladder, going with the triple warmer, and therefore going with the center energy in the body that's associated, that's akin to the galactic center inside of ourselves, and makes us more prone for that energy to go haywire and spew out a lot of chaotic energy. So dramatic weather shifts, number one in nature, perhaps with natural catastrophes, breeding particular kinds of bugs that normally don't exist. But in the human body, also dramatic inclination to more autoimmune problems, as we've seen, not just a virus coming in and we get a fever and then we get over it, but that there's this catastrophic collapse of our own immune system that, because it's that allergic response that then killed people in the COVID pandemic. So you're absolutely correct. I mean, even with my superficial knowledge of the system, there is the Gengzi Nian, which was the year 2019 going into 2020. Geng is the heavenly stem and Zi is the earthly branch. of a 12 system that and a 10 system that come together from the 6-year cycle. And that year is called the year where the heavenly stem is gung and the earthly one is stem is marked with zi. And that is a year for natural disasters and viruses and pandemics and also political upheavals. And then it takes plenty of years to recover from that. So I think that definitely came true in the last few years there.
Very helpful overview and bringing it into our personal practices, knowing the pattern that it's in. Is there something on your website or a reading that you would point us to? In general, the summit is offering your workshop tomorrow in terms of practicing and doing Qigong and living according to the cultivation of the central vessel of energy. Are there other resources in terms of paying more attention to certain meridians because of the larger pattern in history?
Yeah, the very good question. The 12 meridians are, of course, pathways for the central energy to circulate through our body. And in our body, that energy resides here in the connection of these upper chakra centers, and then this lower, more galactic center-like lower dantian, as the Chinese say, the first and second chakra region. And so, as we will learn tomorrow, there is you start low, focusing on the center by breathing into your lower abdomen. Is the original meaning of meditation. Focusing on the center means focusing on the lower abdomen. And then there are certain movements, very often left, right, up, down movements, where you rebalance instead of constantly using your right hand in some kind of a sport like boxing or so. You equally use the left and the right to recenter yourself. So in a nutshell, all efforts of Chinese medicine working with qi is always to recenter yourself. And we'll learn some simple exercises with movement and with breathing and with visualization, mental focusing, that I have learned in my time in China to do that. Because when the qi is not down here, we living at a time of counterflow to begin with. That's really what global warming is that our lower battery heat is coming out of storage and is heating up the planet globally. And in the human body, it is coming out of storage and rising up. So we all anxious and palpitating and can't sleep and have high blood pressure, have acid reflux. Those are all like energy not being stored in the lower center, but kind of coming upward. These are sort of diseases of our time. And there is nothing that drives this movement of making the energy come out of the box and be counterflowing and being, from a Western perspective, we would say we chock full of stress hormones like cortisol, adrenaline, etc., rising up our blood pressure that then gets even higher with drinking too much coffee, etc., to kind of finding a way to recenter. And of course, on a global scale, it is not to spin with the news and kind of, because fear is driving this movement of creating more stress hormones, creating more counterflow. And so both, not just with the breath, with the visualization, we focus ourselves, but also apply common sense in our everyday life. And it comes to looking at the world, looking how we run our lives, and not like constantly being this, oh my God, what's happening here? Oh my God, there's another war over here. Oh my God, there's yet another, there's the monkeypox over here. What are we going to do about that? But sort of kind of stay focused in ourselves and trust that we have the ability to meet whatever comes that is out there, and not get so worked up and wrapped up in these external stimuli, but stay with our center.
Thank you for your wisdom. We are eager to be with you for the workshop tomorrow. Thank you very much, Dr. Fruehauf.
Thank you very much for having me once again. And thank everybody who came to listen. It's been an absolute pleasure. And I'm looking forward to tomorrow.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.